Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the most pivotal battles in history, examining the strategic context, operational art, and human cost of war. I'm your host, General Biography, and today we're going to explore one of the most decisive conflicts of the Middle Ages, the Battle of Dorylaeum, fought on July 1097. This battle marked a crucial turning point in the First Crusade, as Christian forces clashed with the Turkish army in the scorching heat of Anatolia. The Turks had been making steady gains in Asia Minor, and their presence threatened to cut off the vital trade routes between Europe and the Middle East. In response, Pope Urban II called for a crusade at the Council of Clermont in 1095, urging Christians to take up arms and reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule. The call to arms resonated throughout Christendom, and a diverse array of crusaders began to assemble in Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. These warriors came from various regions, including France, Germany, Italy, and England, each with their own distinct culture, language, and military traditions. The Crusader army was led by prominent nobles such as Bohemond of Taranto, Godfrey of Bouillon, and Raymond of Toulouse, who would play key roles in the forthcoming battle. Meanwhile, the Seljuk Sultan, Kilij Arslan I, had been busy consolidating his power in Anatolia, a region of rolling hills, vast plains, and snow-capped mountains. The Turks had established a formidable empire, with its capital in Nicaea, a strategic city located on the shores of Lake Ascanius. As the Crusaders approached, Kilij Arslan I began to mobilize his forces, including contingents of Turkish cavalry and infantry, as well as mercenaries from other regions. The Byzantines, caught in the middle, would have to navigate this treacherous landscape carefully, lest they find themselves at odds with both parties. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos was a shrewd politician who had maintained a delicate balance of power between the Crusaders and the Turks. However, as the Crusader army grew in size and strength, he began to worry about their intentions and the potential consequences of their actions. The fate of the crusade, and indeed the future of the Middle East, hung in the balance. The clash of steel on steel, the thunder of hooves, and the cries of the wounded will come alive as we examine the tactical genius and bravery that define this epic confrontation. On July 1097, these two armies faced off on the scorching hot plains of Anatolia, near the town of Dorylaeum. The Crusader army, consisting of approximately 20,000 soldiers, was a diverse force with contingents from France, Germany, Italy, and England. They were led by prominent nobles such as Bohemond of Taranto, Godfrey of Bouillon, and Raymond of Toulouse, who would play key roles in the battle. The Turkish army, estimated to be around 10,000 strong, was primarily composed of cavalry and infantry from various regions, including mercenaries. As the two armies clashed, the Crusaders formed a defensive circle, with their infantry and archers at the center, surrounded by a ring of cavalry. This tactic allowed them to protect themselves from the Turkish horsemen, who were renowned for their speed and agility. The Turks, on the other hand, employed their traditional tactics, using their mounted archers to weaken the Crusader lines before charging with their heavy cavalry. The battle was fierce and intense, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Crusaders held their ground against the Turkish onslaught, but they were vastly outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Just when it seemed that the Turks would emerge victorious, a contingent of Crusader cavalry led by Bohemond of Taranto launched a surprise counterattack, breaking through the Turkish lines and sending their enemy into disarray. As the dust settled, the Crusaders had emerged victorious, having successfully repelled the Turkish attack and secured a crucial victory. According to the medieval historian Anna Komnena, the Franks fought with great courage, and though they were outnumbered, they held their ground against the Turkish onslaught. The aftermath of the battle saw the Crusaders regrouping and tending to their wounded, while the Turks retreated back to their capital in Nicaea. The victory at Dorylaeum marked a significant turning point in the First Crusade, as it allowed the Crusaders to continue their march towards Jerusalem, ultimately leading to the capture of the city in 1099. The Crusader victory on July 1, 1097, marked a significant turning point in the First Crusade, paving the way for the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. However, the aftermath of this triumph would ultimately lead to the decline of the Crusader movement and the rise of new powers in the region. In the years following the Battle of Dorylaeum, the Crusaders established a network of states in the Middle East, including the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, and the Principality of Antioch. These states were characterized by a complex system of governance, with feudal lords and vassals holding power over various territories. However, this system was also marked by internal conflicts, power struggles, and external threats from Muslim forces. One of the primary challenges faced by the Crusader states was the constant pressure from neighboring Muslim powers, including the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt and the Seljuk Turks in Anatolia. These forces frequently launched attacks on Crusader territories, seeking to exploit their weaknesses and undermine their authority. In response, the Crusaders were forced to maintain a strong military presence, which drained their resources and diverted attention away from other pressing issues, such as governance and administration. Despite these challenges, the Crusader states experienced a period of relative stability and prosperity during the 12th century. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, in particular, became a major center of trade and commerce, with merchants from across Europe and the Middle East flocking to its markets. The city of Jerusalem itself was transformed into a thriving metropolis, with the construction of new buildings, roads, and infrastructure. However, this period of stability was short-lived. In 1144, the Crusader state of Edessa fell to the Muslim forces of Imad ad-Din Zengi, marking a significant turning point in the history of the Crusades. This defeat led to a renewed sense of urgency among European leaders, who called for a new crusade to reclaim the lost territories and protect Christian interests in the Middle East. The Second Crusade, launched in 1147, ultimately proved to be a disastrous failure. The Crusader armies were defeated at the Battle of Inab in 1149, and the campaign ended in disarray and recrimination. This defeat marked the beginning of the end of the Crusader movement, as European leaders began to lose interest in the costly and bloody conflicts in the Middle East. Over the next century, the Crusader states continued to decline, weakened by internal conflicts, external pressures, and the rising power of Muslim forces. In 1187, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was dealt a devastating blow when it was defeated by the forces of Saladin at the Battle of Hattin. This defeat led to the loss of Jerusalem and the eventual collapse of the Crusader states. The Crusades had a profound impact on the Middle East, shaping the course of politics, culture, and society for centuries to come. They also left an indelible mark on European history, influencing the development of art, literature, and architecture. In conclusion, the Battle of Dorylaeum was a turning point in the First Crusade, marking the beginning of a new era of Christian expansion in the Middle East. However, the aftermath of this victory would ultimately lead to the decline of the Crusader movement and the rise of new powers in the region. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.